Did you know that you do not have to do a credit check? You do not have to show any of your financials. You do not have to be verified by a bank. Heck, you don't even have to use a bank at all to buy real estate, to invest in real estate. It's true. And there's a way to do this, and it's called creative financing. And so this video is dedicated to a deal I'm about to do. And because I've been studying this as much as possible, I've tried to do many of these deals. So this is basically me sharing my journey. I'm basically a crash test dummy for the military community that wants to invest in real estate. And I've invested in a lot of different real estate, and I've tried to do many creative financing deals, and a lot of them fell through for one reason or another. But I have one that's about to come up that I think is very promising. And I'll explain how I think about this. And I'll explain the different ways to invest in real estate creatively. And it's not an exhaustive list, but for those that are just starting off with real estate and you want to understand the mindset behind, wait, how can I just forego using a bank? I'll explain that right now. Okay, so creative financing is an all-encompassing term for the different ways that you can buy real estate in the non-traditional way, like where you go to a bank and you put like 20% down and they have to check you as an individual as the guarantor of that loan to be able to get that property, or they have to check the property's financials to see if they are okay with lending on that deal. So in this situation, you basically work with typically the owner or the seller directly. And so sometimes this can be referred to as seller financing, but this is also, there's so many different layers to how you can structure this that it's not always just a simple seller finance deal, because there's so many levers you can pull and different approaches to this. And that's what we're going to dive into. I'm going to talk about traditional seller financing. I'm going to talk about subject to seller finance or subject to deals, and then how you can wrap that in with seller financing. And also I'm going to talk about loan assumptions. Now there are other ways. Those are the three I'm going to focus on right now. So seller financing, okay, let's start with number one. Traditionally is just, hey, you're basically paying off what you owe on a property that you're buying directly to the seller. And so in very simple terms, let's say that the seller completely owns outright, there's no debt on the current property. And let's say it's just a $100,000 property. Let's just keep it simple. You can come up to them and be like, hey, can I pay this off in installments? Basically, I don't want to go to a bank. I want to take this off your hands as soon as possible. I know you're in a hurry. Can I just pay you $1,000 a month instead of going to the bank for a loan? And you can do this. You can structure it to where there's no interest rate. You can just be like, hey, I'm just going to pay it off in installments. I'm just doing principal only payments. That's pretty gnarly. Or you can be like, hey, I'll pay it off just like I would to a bank with an interest rate of like 6%, interest only as well. So in this case, it's opposite of principal. It's interest only. So you're not having to pay down the principal as well. You're just doing interest only payments. Or you can do a hybrid where it's what's called amortized, where it's just like a traditional bank where you're paying interest and principal, whatever. I'm not going to get too in the weeds right now. But the point is think of this is like you can go directly to the seller and just be like, hey, I want to buy it from you. And all you have to do is you have to basically say, you have to go to an attorney and have them set up the loan note between you and that individual, not the bank. Because typically what happens, right, is you give the individual, let's say 20%, the bank gives the 80%, and now you owe the bank the 80%. And so you are the one holding the property. It's your name on it, right? It's deeded to you, but the bank is not going to let you hold title until you pay it off completely. And so that is how typically it's structured, but you can go directly. So another way to do this is subject to. That's where if somebody has a current loan on the property, they don't own it outright, you can tell them, hey, you keep the loan in your name, but deed the title over to me, right? And so it'll be in my name, but I'm going to take over the payments. So in this example, like let's say it's a $100,000 home and there's $80,000 of debt on it. And the seller's like, okay, well, I'll just hand over that note to you. And you're like, okay. And you start making the payments on the $80,000. Let's say it's, I don't know, $500, right? So you're starting to pay the payments. You have the deed is titled over to you, or sorry, the title is deeded over to you. And now that property is technically in your name, but the loan isn't. And so the reason why it's called subject to is because it's subject to the note being called due. And what that means is just a fancy term for saying, hey, if the bank that lended that original $80,000, if they realize that hey, your name is on the property now, they might want to consider that a sale. And there's this thing called due on sale clause. And so if they decide that that's a sale, they could be like, hey, we're going to call the note due, right? And so that happens, from what I've heard, typically less than 1% of the time. It's really rare because typically banks, if they're getting good, solid payments on a property every single month, they kind of want to just keep riding that interest rate. They're making an interest off of that, and it's safe, good, stable income for the bank. It's a return. And so they might not want to call it due in the first place. So now, and by the way, this is completely legal, right? So now if you're doing this, you're asking like, what about that extra $20,000? Like what happens to that? Well, there's a couple of things. You can either do seller finance on top of that. So you can be like, hey, I'll give you $5,000 down payment, and that remaining $15,000 of that $20,000, I'll just pay you off directly, seller, thank you, like $100 a month. Okay, cool. So now you did this subject to deal where like, boom, you're the owner on paper and you're paying off that person's loan, right? So they're kind of like, they're out of the picture. And that remaining $20,000, you give them a $5,000 down payment and $15,000, loan to them directly. Like it's just to them, no bank. And so that is a way you can structure a subject to deal. There's so many other ways to do this, but that's just one example so you understand how subject to works. The third example is a loan assumption. So right now, I had a buyer that wants to buy one of our properties, and they wanted to assume the loan. They wanted to assume the loan, meaning they actually take title and they take the loan. So so certain lenders allow somebody else to take over the loan completely and put it in their name. And with our lender, this actually has 0 fees. And so it's a really easy opportunity for somebody to step in and be like, all right, I want to assume your loan. Boom, they take the loan and they take title. And then whatever on top that you still want to get paid, you can negotiate that separately. You can negotiate that, like I said, they can just pay you in full. Like let's say you want that 20, in that same example, let's say you want them to just write you a check for the 20,000. They can do that. If you want to do seller financing on top of that, if you want some part of a down payment and the rest can be seller financed, whatever you want, that's where you can get creative, right? And so long story short, this completely forgoes the bank. You don't have to deal with the bank, except for if you're doing that subject to or loan assumption, you're going to have to transfer over that stuff either by deeding it over or by actually assuming the loan. The downside of assuming the loan is now you have to qualify for that loan, and the bank might not approve you. Let's say you have a low credit score. You might not be able to assume a loan. So that's why subject to is so lucrative, so exciting, because you can actually take over and start operating a property, have it in your name, and pay off somebody else's loan that they had to qualify for. As long as you're good at making the payments, you're probably not going to get the note called due. And then worst case scenario, if it is called due, you might be able to refinance. You might be able to deed it back to the owner and be like, hey, let's switch it up to like a lease to own contract. Or there's a million different ways. Or you can just refinance it yourself right then and there. But the point is you're trying to get this as quickly as possible. You're trying to not deal with banks. And so direct seller financing or subject to deals are super exciting. And so I'm doing one that's going to be for land. I have a 56-unit apartment complex where there is a strip of land next to it where we want to put a dog park and a playground. And it'd be perfect for us. And the current owner has no use for that land, and nobody will have use for that land except for us, because it's adjacent to us, and then there's a parking lot and like a liquor store. And so like nobody needs that land. The liquor store doesn't need it. The people that used to own the parking lot and that liquor store, it used to be Ponderosa. They don't need it. So like they're eager to not have to pay property taxes and mow that lawn anymore. So they might just sell it to us. And I asked them, like, can I buy it from you in installments? They said yes. They were like, we're open to anything. We just don't want this anymore. So I have great use for it because I can raise my rents if I put a dog park and a playground in. So I'm going to be able to now just pay them monthly, not even any down payment, and take it over. So it's no longer a burden for them. Again, the property taxes and the mowing, that costs probably hundreds of dollars a month. They don't want to deal with that. So it's a win-win. I'm being valuable to them by providing this creative opportunity. It's not you taking advantage of people. You just have to find the people that want to do this, that this is a valuable sale for them to get the property off their hands. Okay, so that was day 16, I believe, of my 30-day challenge. If you like these videos, if this is valuable to you, Please like and subscribe. Share this with your friends and family, especially if they're military, because I think they're going to get extra value from this stuff because it shows that military families can achieve financial freedom during or after the military. This was Active Duty Passive Income. Check us out at activedutypassiveincome.com. And I'll see you later. Let me hit the stop button. Here we go. Woo.